Good afternoon, members. When we rose, we were debating the special prosecutor bill. Member for Soufrière Forcejac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I speak on the bill before us, with your permission, may I join the members before me in acknowledging the sterling service provided to this Parliament by the former clerk, Ms. Lindell Gustave. Also, Mr. Speaker, permit me to join again members before me in expressing condolences to the family of the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Donald Alsey, and to express gratitude for his contribution to the Parliament of St. Lucia and the people of St. Lucia. In addition, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, let me congratulate Mr. David Jordan and his team at the Anglican Church for their Breadfruit Festival, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had the good fortune on Thursday last to visit the Anglican Church Annex. And what I saw was several St. Lucians exhibiting their products. And what I was pleased at as a member, as the Minister for Commerce, was to engage my ministry to ensure that we assist those persons in terms of taking that product from where they were to the domestic and international market, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now to the business before this Honorable House, and that is the debate on the special prosecutor bill, now on the floor of this august House. Mr. Speaker, I rise, and as I rise, I want to say very clearly that I support the bill before us. And as I look again at the purpose of the bill, in clause 2, and the purpose of the bill is to provide for the special prosecutor the investigation and the prosecution of corrupt conduct of public officers and public officials, and for the appointment of the special prosecutor. Mr. Speaker, on page 28 of the SLP manifesto, there are several promises made. But on page 28, item 5 there, under the heading Good Governance, Anti-Corruption and Constitutional Matters, under item 5, very clearly there was a promise by the St. Lucia Labour Party to enact anti-corruption legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, this today is a promise kept. Mr. Speaker, throughout the term of the last administration, as we went about our daily business, we heard an outcry from the public. And that outcry was disgust at the corrupt acts of the last administration. People continued to query the abuse of authority, the perceived acts of corruption and wastage. And Mr. Speaker, last week and week before, in social media, the United PAC, which I believe is an arm of the last administration, was looking for friends. They were looking for friends to tarnish reputations.
Okay.
They were accusing yours truly of selling sugar or receiving funds from selling sugar, Mr. Speaker.
Wow.
But I remained quiet and watched for the past 2 weeks to see what the comments were. Mr. Speaker, members of the United Workers' Party that I have served with, and some of them are in this august body, members of the public, and the persons that I have served with throughout St. Lucia understands who Emma Hippolyte is and knows of the DNA of this lady standing here.
Yeah.
And one of this DNA is anti-corruption. All my life, I have served at the bank with the member for Suazel Saltibus. I have served at the National Insurance, where the checks were bigger and had all the zeros. I have served as the Director of Audit of this honorable for this country. I have served internationally. I have served on all NGOs, and not once, not once have any person have any reason to point the finger at me. Not once. So when we offer ourselves for public service, I needed nobody to explain to me that I was giving myself up for selfless service. Because if, as an accountant, if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't come in government.
Okay.
Because I know how to make it.
Yeah.
I've gone throughout the world. I've seen salaries. I've been offered proposals. So, I was very disappointed at United PAC trying to tarnish the reputation of persons. Within this country, we must realize where we are, where we were, and where we ought to be going. We need to do so. And tarnishing other person's reputation should not be one of them. So with these few words, and remember, I've used this august body to make my statement. I don't go on public media and so on. I have been elected to serve in this honorable house, and I have been elected by the people of Soufrière Fauchejacques to serve them. And I will do so without fear or favor. And I'm standing here to say I support this bill in its entirety, and let the chip fall where it falls. I support the Honorable Prime Minister and our members of the executive to say that we need to take a turn. We need to take a stand in this country. Too long, Mr. Speaker, we hear of accusations. And today I'm not even going to articulate them. I think other members are going to do so. But I don't have to remind the members of the public of the numerous accusations of corruptions, wastage, and excess cost. This has cost our country significantly. So today, the discussion on this special prosecutor bill is the beginning of a new direction for us as a people. And I am pleased that I'm part of this august body that is going to pass this piece of legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, the rampant act of corruption and abuse has cost this country dearly. All of us, when we took public office, took a public oath, and that oath was to serve our people and our country. We did not take an oath to serve ourselves. The current bill, the special prosecutor bill, its focus is to hold public servants and public officials accountable, and to remind us that we need to walk the straight and narrow. Mr. Speaker, I am one who believes that the tone at the top must be right. The tone at the top must be right. And today, I want to publicly thank the Honorable Prime Minister, because at all our meetings, he continued to exhort us that this government will not tolerate corruption. So I want to thank him publicly. Mr. Speaker, we cannot hold the young people, we cannot hold the poor among us accountable and let public officials and public officers cannot allow them to plunder the national resource. We cannot continue to allow this to happen, nor should we condone it, nor turn a blind eye. So today I'm saying we cannot allow public officials to estimate projects, to overestimate projects, and to share the proceeds. We cannot continue to allow persons to pay people for projects that never took place. We cannot continue allowing shoddy and poor quality work and allowing people to pocket the excesses. That is what we have done. That is the corruption that has happened in our country. That is why some of our roads are in such poor state. That is why, as a government, we do not have the excess resources now to take care of our healthcare programs, because we have not done what we were supposed to do. Mr. Speaker, the net effect of corruption is the bleeding of a nation. And corruption at the top is a guarantee that we will have corruption in every institution and throughout our country. Therefore, we must take action to reverse this cancer that is quietly and slowly choking us as a nation. Mr. Speaker, corruption robs us, this country, and not only this country, it robs nations of investments. Investors, when they get to a country, wants to know that they are operating in a country where there is ethics, where there are values, and where the rule of law prevails. Where the investment, these investors want the investment to be impacted solely by market forces, not by public officials and public officers requesting upfront payments. Immediately we do so, we are increasing the cost of the investment. Investors do not like that. And as long as we have that practice in the country, investors stay away. So as a government, I am very pleased that we are signaling to the international world that this St. Lucia will not tolerate corruption. Mr. Speaker, Corruption causes instability, inequality, poverty, and it erodes our national wealth, Mr. Speaker. But the good thing about this, Mr. Speaker, is that corruption is as old as the hills. And there are ways and means to reduce the risk of corruption for our country. So, Mr. Speaker, the passage of this special prosecutor bill is the first, or what you'd say, one of several actions that we must take as a country to fight corruption. Mr. Speaker, there is an International Corruption Perception Index, the CPI, published by Transparency International, and this report is published annually. Mr. Speaker, the CPI ranks countries by the perceived level of public sector corruption on a scale of 0, meaning highly corrupt, to 100, being not corrupt. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia is ranked at 56.
Wow.
Remember, 0 is highly corrupt and 100 not corrupt. We are at 56. We are at rank current. We are at 56, which is saying we are almost at the center. So what are we saying to the international world? When somebody goes on and look at that international CPI index and look at St. Lucia, because any investor thinking of coming in to invest, that is one of the searches they do. They go and check your corruption index. They go and check your ease of doing business. And if St. Lucia is ranked at 56, we are saying that 50% of our people are corrupt. Mr. Speaker, I'll say that in Creole. Nous avons un gouvernement pour un bon petit de temps ici. Et puis, manière, vous avez fait des affaires. Un chef ministre, vous avez chanté un chef bagay. Moun ka tapé payer pour travailler, pas faire. Moun ka tapé contrat et puis au cas où mettez pli sous contrat là puis ek ba yo ti mettre l'argent ça là sous côté. Mr. Speaker, moi voulais dire tout gens simple ici. Ça c'est corruption. Et ça a affecté pas seulement manière gouvernement qu'a opéré, mais il a aussi affecté le pays. Parce que si l'argent qui allait en corruption, l'année travail qui supposé faire un pays, si maintenant pour bâtir, pas qu'à bâtir bien, si maintenant besoin fait pas ni l'argent pour faire et bagaille comme ça. Et puis comme on a dit, l'année en index international qui a mesuré tout pays à sous qui quantité de corruption tient un pays. Ça qui est 0, ça mine un pays ça là, il y a chaque corruption. Si on y a ça mine ou pas une pièce corruption. Et puis après ça là, index ça là, j'ai mis Saint-Lucie à 66.
56.
Hein? 56, 56. Mr. Speaker, je dis ça pas bon pour nous. Parce que nous avons dit ces gens, l'autre pays international, d'argent Saint-Lucie et la corruption. Je tous ces gens qui ont écouté, je ces gens qui pêchent moyen en Barons Drive. Je ces femmes en Fontaine-Jacques. Tu es content pour gens l'autre pays garder en manière ça là. Alors moi je voulais dire, oui merci Premier ministre là pour aujourd'hui pour garder pour loi ça nous avons mis en place là pour mettre règles pour servants civils et puis ces politiciens pour nous ça agir primaire pour nous taper pour nous manager qu'on nous en pays primaire parce que nous avons manager qu'on nous. Mr. Speaker, as I've said, this gives the international world a very poor impression of us as a people. Mr. Speaker, we need to work towards getting a score closer to 100. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we must tackle this cancer head on. We must take steps to expose corrupt activities and risks that may otherwise remain hidden. We must keep the public sector honest, transparent, and accountable. We must help stop dishonest practices. And we must ensure that public sector employees act in the public interest. And how do we do this, Mr. Speaker? Researchers have told us ways to reduce bribery and corruption risk. We need to update our anti-bribery and anti-corruption policies. So in addition to this piece of legislation, which is the first step, we need to update, and that is looking at our financial rules, that is looking at through the Ministry of the Public Service, to review the rules and regulations within the public service and to focus this culture within the service. This would require for us, Mr. Speaker, significant training within the public service. Civil servants need to understand what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. They need to know what is acceptable. They need to know what is not acceptable. And they need to understand their role in fighting corruption. And in order for them to understand that, we need to train them. Mr. Speaker, we need to create an anti-bribery culture. And that has to be clear and consistent. And that message must start from the top. That message must start from the top. And after we present that message, we then have to practice it. It is not enough for us to say it. We need to practice it.
Wow.
Because if within the Cabinet of Ministers we pass this legislation, we speak here today, and tomorrow we go back and do everything that is not in this, then we will not fight corruption.
That's right.
All of us know of the cancer on the ground. Everybody wants a contract. And they want a contract without doing the work. Or there is a contract and the quality of work is not. Everybody's looking for a shortcut.
Yeah.
It is a cancer that is slowly eating up our economy and our people.
That's right.
There is significant work that we must do. Significant work at all levels. Yeah. Not only within the public service, but the public must start understanding what an act of corruption is. The children at our school level must start understanding. We need to start teaching them ethics, values. We need to teach our children ethics. They need to understand it, because we don't go silent and then somebody's at 20, we start changing that DNA. We need to tackle this cancer at every level of our society. We need to do that.
Well said, Auntie.
They need to do that. And how we fuse that? We start today. But the message must be continuous. We must have public notices. campaigns to get our society to a different level. And that is why I stand here today to support this act. The Ministry of Education has significant work to do to infuse the values, the ethics into our curriculum. We must do it. And if we don't do it, then we don't expect our young people to just follow the right path. We need to do it.
Yeah.
When I look at certain sections of the Act, Section 20, disclosure of interests. Now, this is not only applicable to public officials, it is a good governance practice.
Yeah.
And all the persons we have sitting on boards, whether it is private sector or public sector, if you are sitting on a board and there is an issue being discussed, and that issue, you have an interest in that issue, directly or indirectly, you need to publicly say that at the meeting and get yourself out of the meeting so that a decision is taken. That is private and public. Because I don't want us to think that this corruption act that we're doing there, this one is specifically to the public service. But there is a wider societal problem that we have to address. I am saying so because I get a request every day when people walk into my constituency office. The things they ask you to do, and you have to question them to say, are you asking me to do so, and so? So I'm saying I don't think sometimes they understand what they are asking us to do. They are asking us to turn a blind eye.
That's right.
And it is fundamental, Mr. Speaker, that public education, that public discourse is continued from after the passage of this act. It has to be continuous. And today my eyes are on the two members opposite. My eyes are on the two members opposite.
Yeah.
Because this is a historic moment for us. And as leaders, we need to change course.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you to join with us to change course today.
Yes.
That is why I'm not even articulating what has happened. Change course today.
That's right.
Because unless we change course, that boat is going to sink.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, Section 26 of the Act, protection of persons making complaints. I think this is extremely important because in order for us to end the corruption, we need to have protection for the persons who are willing to share the information that they have with us. Not only do we need the protection, but we need a system. So the member for Babono, who is the Minister for the Public Service, needs to ensure that a whistleblower's policy and system is implemented at the same time that we are passing this act. Because unless you have a whistleblower protection system in place, then we will have the act and people will not have a system to provide the information to which the public prosecutor will get. Mr. Speaker, the other office that is not mentioned here that I believe that this bill is going to impact is the Office of the Director of Audit. Most of us, and I think I had a private conversation with the Attorney General, but the Director of Audit has a significant role to play in the performance of independent audits of all government, central government, and all government institutions. Now, I know that the Director of Audit, that office seems to have gone comatose. So I'm really hoping I'm really hoping that with this piece of legislation, and that office is an independent office, so they do not report to the Prime Minister. It is or the Minister of Finance. They are receiving finance from the budget, but the office of the Director of Office is another constitutional post. And whoever is sitting in that office now must understand his or her role in terms of fighting corruption and providing independent audit reports. The process is the Director of Audit is going to perform these audits, and they're going to be tabled in this honorable house, and then it is passed on to the committee, a special committee of this place, and then we take it from there. So with the appointment of a special prosecutor, my eyes will be on the office of the Director of Audit. He or she, that office, needs to wake up and perform its function effectively. These reports has to be tabled on a timely manner so that the information flows straight in. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, yes, I want to say that this is a historic moment for us. I am pleased to support this bill that is before us, and I want again to exhort all members to support it. I support it, and I believe that we are in the right direction. May God guide us. I thank you.
The member for Swizzle Saltibus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, before dealing with the bill beforehand, to first extend sympathies to the family of Ms. Diana Theodore, who was found dead at her residence over the weekend, Mr. Speaker. You know, every loss of life brings sorrow to loved ones, but when it's as tragic as what happened over the weekend, Mr. Speaker, it is very depressing, particularly to a community like ours, Shrewsbury Saltibus, that's known for its love, tranquility, and peace, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I take the opportunity to continue to urge each and every one of us as members of Parliament, the highest office in the land, Mr. Speaker, to continue to play our part to ensure, you know, that we preach to our citizens the issue of tolerance, Mr. Speaker. We speak to our citizens of, you know, trying to settle differences other ways, Mr. Speaker. I'm in no way trying to determine what is the reason for what happened. But, Mr. Speaker, I think the message has to be that we have to put an end, Mr. Speaker, for this kind of hideous crimes that happen in our society. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take the opportunity to bid farewell to the clerk, Ms. Gustav, and wish her all the best in her endeavors. She still has a lot of life ahead of her, and I wish her the very best, God willing. I also want to take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, you know, when you have to say thanks, you have to say thanks. And some of us, for political reasons, may not want to when something happens. But I want to thank the Prime Minister for keeping his promise and assisting through the SSDF the children of Saltibus with the back-to-school supplies, Mr. Speaker. But I want to also take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I beg your pardon? Maybe more than you, yes. But I want to take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to remind this House, because, Mr. Speaker, when we were in office and we had the 6 members here, one of the things that they continuously said was, there is one parliamentary representative. And I know, Mr. Speaker, wrong is wrong and right is right. And we have to recognize there is one parliamentary representative for Choiseul Saltibus, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, no, but that's my point. Wrong is wrong, right is right, because this is what this is what. So, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, likewise the colleagues when in opposition, indicated what was happening was wrong and they would deal differently. So I'm saying, and experience has shown, Mr. Speaker, that when we behave that way, and it's on the record, you will not win. Okay? So I just wanted to put that out there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, made mention of something that was put out on social media yesterday with regards to, I think it was murder or something that happened in the country. Something you said. Mr. Speaker, you have to condemn anything like that. And I'll tell you why, Mr. Speaker. And we must not be one-sided when we condemn him, Mr. Speaker. Because all of us, I am very happy if this country succeeds under this government, Mr. Speaker. Because if this country succeeds, I succeed, Mr. Speaker. And all of us succeed because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, if the world is going in the direction that is going, the little caca that I have in the bank will worth nothing at the end of the day. So all of us must want the country to do good. So when it is said, and my good friend from Kashri South East, while he was speaking, he was, chiding me. Kashri South, he was chiding me. But Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, it is, if it's said, and all of us, and one of the things we have to do, Mr. Speaker, is to encourage our surrogates. If they want to have intelligent discussions on social media, that's what we should do. But this MAPE and this back to front, Mr. Speaker, we need to stop that, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I will continue. Mr. Speaker, the meaning of corruption just went online, and the meaning of corruption speaks to dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that interpretation of the word corruption, and with the intent of what this bill is supposed to be coming to the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, the intent of the bill, I, as the parliamentary representative for Choiseul Saltibus, I, as John Bradley Felix, support the intent of the bill, Mr. Speaker. There's no two ways about it, Mr. Speaker. Okay? Because if it's one thing, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Member for Jack said it, the background we come from, Mr. Speaker, we can sleep well at night. I have always said to people I associate with my friends, I am not afraid of anybody coming at my home at any time of the night and knocking and asking for anything that I owe them. Mr. Speaker, you know one of the rude awakenings I had when I was in office? The kind of people, and it would surprise you, Mr. Speaker, the kind of people who would meet you on the road, and you know what they would tell you? You need to take care of yourself, in these 5 years. Because when you see you out there, nobody is watching. And that was a rude awakening to me, Mr. Speaker. Because it appears to me that it's an acceptance. It's an acceptance that you need to get involved in something to take care of yourself, Mr. Speaker. So this thing is far-reaching. It's not an overnight revelation. This thing has been going on for a very long time, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell anybody who wants to come for John Bradley Felix, I have a very clean slate, Mr. Speaker, and you can come. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the intent of the bill. However, Mr. Speaker, my concern has always been with what I believe to be duplication. Duplication, Mr. Speaker. You have seen a few bills come into Parliament, and there appears to be an issue of just doing the same thing over again and giving it a different name. And why I say that, Mr. Speaker, and the Prime Minister in his presentation, he said that this bill, and he mentioned the areas, he said this bill, Section 3, this bill does not affect the authority of the DPP. I'm just shortening what it says. It does not affect the AG. It does not affect the Parliamentary Commissioner. It does not affect the Integrity Commission. It does not affect the FIA, the Financial Intelligence Authority. And all of these institutions that I named here, Mr. Speaker, actually are doing what the Special Prosecutor is, the intent of what the Special Prosecutor is supposed to do. And if I go further, Mr. Speaker, and I look at the Constitution, Section 73, control of public prosecution. It says, there shall be a director of public prosecution whose office shall be a public office. The director of public prosecution shall have power in any case in which he considered it desirable to institute and undertake criminal proceedings against any person before any court of law other than a court-martial in respect of any offense alleged to have been committed by that person. To take over and continue any such criminal proceedings that have been instituted or undertaken by any other person or authority. And C, to discontinue at any stage before judgment is delivered any such criminal proceedings instituted or undertaken by himself or any other person in authority. And quite a bit of other things which I believe is in conflict. And so, Mr. Speaker, what I'm driving at here is that under the Constitution, the Director of Public Prosecution seemed to have a very significant role, and a role that should not be equivalent to any other role under the Constitution. But when we look at what is given to the Special Prosecutor, it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that there are some cases where the Director of Public Prosecution is ceding some of his authority to the Special Prosecutor. And that cannot be constitutional. Now, I would think that to make the Director of Public Prosecution more legitimate, if I could use that expression, we would have come here and maybe change an aspect of the Constitution. I think that would have been the easier and the best way to do it. I heard the Prime Minister speak to, there's a similar case in Jamaica. But in Jamaica, from what I saw, in a brief glance, the leader of the opposition is also involved in that particular legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot seem, and you know, the Prime Minister was very insistent that this is not a wish, and you know, it will appear that way because obviously it was a campaign promise and that kind of thing. So we must never put any doubt in people's mind as to why we pass various legislations, Mr. Speaker. And I think, you know, that's what this bill is doing. As I indicated, the intent is good, but what the bill is doing, Mr. Speaker, I think it's going to be misread by a lot of people, Mr. Speaker. Because I think, based on the bill, is I think there's a lot of, there could be various bias and in terms of the vetting of some of the cases that can be taken up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while I was the Minister of Commerce, I've had to deal with a lot of public officers. In my ministry, public officers who work in overseas offices and officers from other ministries. And I would much prefer if we would come to Parliament to address the issue of some public officers. Some, because they always say the bad apple rots all the other apples. If we would come to Parliament to address, and you can call it dishonesty, where public officers steal the people who pay their money, the taxpayers, with their time, Mr. Speaker, with lousy service, Mr. Speaker. We have some public officers who believe they're king of their domain, Mr. Speaker, and it must never be that. We have to from the top, to stop some of the things that happen where people will tell you if you want a service, pass something on a side. That is corruption. These are the kind of things that we need to come and make sure we strengthen. And the problem is, from a political, you see, all of that thing stems from a political wave, because if one government decides to take a certain action in a certain direction, then you get this, the other side making a political thing about it. And we just continue to be spinning top in mud. If, as the member for Frusa Sanchez said, we have to start, and as the member for Castries South is, we have to start somewhere. Let us start now. Let us start now. Yes, let's forget about all the errors of the past if we want to turn a clean slate. That would be good for all of us, Mr. Speaker. But there are too many public officers making St. Lucian suffer for a service that they deserve and they require, Mr. Speaker. There are public officers collecting salary and they're on disciplinary leave for years. That's corruption in my mind. These are the kind of things that we have to address, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I support the intent of the bill, but I do believe it is a duplicate of what we already have in existence. If at the end of the day, what the Prime Minister wanted to do in terms of appointing a special prosecutor, it could have been strengthening the DPP's office, and you have an individual with the same qualifications that he has expressed, part of the DPP's office. But from and I am no constitutional lawyer, the member for Vieux-Fort South is not there, I'm not sure if he's returning, but I would love to have heard his take as he calls himself a backbencher, on how he interprets this thing versus the Constitution. I'd have loved to have heard his take on that, Mr. Speaker, because we, Mr. Speaker, have to be very careful when we pass certain bills. And I am thinking that this bill will have to be put to the test at some point in time. And if anybody, whether it was any of my colleagues, well, if the caca is half mass, the caca is half mass. But if on your side is the same thing too, Mr. Speaker, you understand? So it has to, and we have to have a very clear guideline, Mr. Speaker, as to how we're going to identify what is taken before that special prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. But at the end of the day, I support anything that's there to stamp out corruption. I just believe, Mr. Speaker, the manner in which it was brought to this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, leaves a lot of open-ended questions, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for my brief contribution. Thank you.
The member for Dennery South.
Mr. Speaker, let me take the opportunity to always thank the people of Dennery South, particularly Dennery Village, Laka and Lima, for electing me to be the parliamentary rep and to make me be very proud of myself standing there in this honorable house to represent them. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to express my condolences to the family of the former speaker, and to say to the family, to ask them to, be strong as they go through their period of bereavement. Mr. Speaker, in the throne speech by the acting Governor General, His Excellency Cyril Charles, he focused on the anti-corruption and emphasized a zero tolerance approach to corruption. The Hon Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre additionally stated in his budget policy statement that legislation respecting the appointment of a special prosecutor to carry out investigations into acts of alleged public corruption would be enacted during this financial year 2022-2023. Mobile dit ça en créole. Gouvernement général, là il fait speech li plus bonne année ça là. Il fait un announcement that gouvernement ça là pas qu'à supporter rien pour faire corruption. Et honorable Philippe J. Pierre dit après ça that nous devons apporter un special prosecutor pour investiguer acts of corruption. Mr. Speaker, today this government is making this happen. Mr. Speaker, when you allow corruption to flourish, Mr. Speaker, it is not just a few that will suffer in this country. Everybody will suffer, Mr. Speaker, because you are actually depleting the resources of the state and making it more difficult to meet the needs of the people. It diminishes our ability to build and maintain our roads, Mr. Speaker, like the member for Sufre mentioned. Building new schools, Mr. Speaker. Assisting our farmers with fertilizer and other farm inputs, Mr. Speaker. You know, and assisting our young people in terms of employment opportunities, Mr. Speaker. Our social programs, Mr. Speaker, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to meet financial resources to deal with those programs because of the whole issue of corruption. Now, Mr. Speaker, when I became a candidate, I mean, a number of persons, when I visited their homes during the campaign, there was a call. Sous le gouvernement salagien qui pas fait rien about corruption, ma caille vote by encore. It is because, Mr. Speaker, they are all aware of the levels of corruption that was going on or that has been going on in St. Lucia. And they voted for the St. Lucia Labour Party because we made that an election promise during our campaign, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very happy to be part of this team to make sure that we do what we promised the electorates, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that this is just the beginning. This bill will not solve the problem immediately, Mr. Speaker, but it's a start and a demonstration by this government to prove to the people that we are doing what we promised. Mr. Speaker, every Wednesday when I sit in my constituency office, there are a number of persons coming to me for various forms of assistance. And Mr. Speaker, initially I said, I wonder why I went into this, because they were of the view that once they asked for it, Mr. Speaker, you're just supposed to deliver it to them. They couldn't understand when you said to them that I will try to assist you, I will give you some form of help, but they were of the view that once you are a politician, you should always have the financial resources in your pocket to just give to them. What are they thinking, Mr. Speaker? You tend to wonder whether they think, aside the salary that you get in monthly, there are other means of, generating income. And it's because, Mr. Speaker, this has been a concern for our citizens of St. Lucia. And I'm very happy that this government is making a big effort to address it. Mr. Speaker, it's not a bill that speaks only to civil servants. Politicians like us, as I mentioned, people seem to think that we are the most corrupt persons in the country. But this is not the case, Mr. Speaker. And I want to call on them to let them know that this is not the case. Mr. Speaker, it is not the case for persons on this side, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a new bill, Mr. Speaker, and it really demonstrates a bold step by this government to address the problem of corruption. I'm happy that my government is taking that bold step, in appointing a special prosecutor, because a special prosecutor would need to direct the operations or the procedures in terms of investigating corruption, Mr. Speaker. Too often in the past, we've played a blind eye on corruption. It's as if we want it to continue to fester. Persons will think twice before thinking of engaging in corruption following the passage of this bill. So if public officers who have been engaged in it and seem to think that they can continue, Mr. Speaker, from today, this bill will circulate in their minds, Mr. Speaker, that there is legislation in place to deter me from continuing whatever practices or acts of corruption in my day-to-day activities as a public servant. We must really change the way things are done in this country, Mr. Speaker, and corruption is one that I think needs urgent attention, and this bill, as I said, will not solve the corruption problem in its entirety one time, but it is a mechanism that will help to getting this problem under control. Mr. Speaker, I remember the days when my mom and other persons would tell you in Creole, as I quote, "Pas point rien qui passe à haut." And Mr. Speaker, I have grown living a life where I listen to my parents. If it does not belong to me, Mr. Speaker, I will not take it. And this bill is an indication that you tamper with what does not belong to you, the bill will take the necessary actions to deal with the situation. Mr. Speaker, and I want to encourage our young people to not to follow this path of corruption, Mr. Speaker. Let them focus, I want them to focus on what we call a fair day's work for a fair day's pay.
That's right.
A fair day's work for a fair day's pay. So if they focus and remain focused on that principle, Mr. Speaker, they will not even want to think of getting involved in any acts of corruption, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to be long, but I want to say to this honorable House that I stand in support of this bill because I know it is a step in the right direction to address and deal with all the acts of corruption that has been happening. And I know once and for all, Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucia Labour Party is delivering on a promise that it made in its election campaign to address all acts of corruption by this bill that we have before us for discussion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my PM for giving us the opportunity to speak to it. And I want to say before closing, I stand in support of this bill. Thank you.
The member for Miko North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I intend to be very brief in my presentation this afternoon. I think the members who went or who spoke before me made it very clear what the intention of the bill is. I think the Prime Minister, we must commend him for his presentation, his initial presentation on the bill. I think he did a very good job in explaining and making it abundantly clear what the bill and what the intention of the bill is, Mr. Speaker. But before I delve into the bill, Mr. Speaker, let me just thank the constituents of Micoud North, from the Parliament Bridge to the Tumasi Bridge, for placing their confidence in me, Mr. Speaker, giving me an opportunity that they gave no Labour candidate before. This is an opportunity that I relish, Mr. Speaker, and I always promise them that I will make the most out of this opportunity. I will do my utmost best to represent them and to give expression to their cause and their plight in Micoud North. I also want to extend condolences to Mrs. Smith, the family of Mrs. Smith, a teacher, beloved teacher in the constituency, who worked day and night to ensure that the growth and development of our children was not something that was taken lightly in the constituency of Micoud North. Now, Mr. Speaker, today we have before us the Special Prosecutor Bill. And one of the reasons I stood to make a very brief presentation, Mr. Speaker, is because I remember during the days of the campaign as a young man, and I'm happy that the member for Denry North is not there when I speak about young men, Mr. Speaker, but I remember going house to house, engaging young persons, having conversations with them, Mr. Speaker. And what I realized was there is a general feeling of disenfranchisement and disenchantment among our young people. The general perception was one where they believe all politicians are the same. I even remember, Mr. Speaker, asking a young man who is my age, a young businessman, to try to convince someone from my constituency who was at the time working with the then parliamentary rep, and I asked him if he could have spoken to him to convince him to vote for me. And his words were that, all these fellas just going that to make themselves. And I think that is the general perception, that politicians go into politics with the motive or the intention of going and make themselves. And they tell you all the nice things before they go in, and when they get in, you know exactly what to expect. And Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that I sit in a government chaired by the Prime Minister, a man who I can remember the very first time that I sat at a cabinet meeting, and it was not the only time that you'll always hear him say that corruption is not something that he's going to allow. And if he smells corruption, that he's going to do everything that he can within his power to deal with it. And usually, your mother or father, depends on how they raise you, Mr. Speaker, you're going to take a certain course of action, or you're going to go in a certain direction. And with the Prime Minister serving at the helm, and with him having such principles, Mr. Speaker, I think this trickles down to every man and every woman that serves in this current cabinet. Mr. Speaker, government officials are caretakers of public trust, and we are placed in positions of trust that affects the lives and finances of public, and finances of the public. And I heard several members speak to the fact that when we engage in corruption, Mr. Speaker, we don't sit and think of who are the people who ultimately suffer. These young children, Mr. Speaker, that we come, and today you hear us talking about passing, or the Prime Minister making allocations available to different parliamentarians to assist in back to school. These parents who are severely affected by COVID, who don't have any means of employment, Mr. Speaker, these are the people who really suffer from the acts of corruption, you know. It's not the man who have, as the Prime Minister like to say, baka, or the man who can afford to pay the lawyer. And we came here a few weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, and we passed legislation to increase the penalties for firearms. We're making it more difficult. We passed laws to make it more difficult for the little man. And I'm happy today that this piece of legislation, this special prosecutor bill, Mr. Speaker, the intention of this bill is to ensure that the special prosecutor can investigate and prosecute corrupt conduct of public officers and public officials. Because for too long, and we need to really eliminate that mentality, and I think that bill is aimed at doing that. The mentality that politicians can get away with anything. or there is always a back-monte or a bathtub kind of deal. And we need to know and understand our roles as politicians. And I'm happy that young people, Mr. Speaker, who are listening today, understand, or they can listen to the debate today, they can listen to the different presentations, and they can take from it the fact that we as a government are doing things and putting certain legislation in place to hold members, public officials accountable when they decide to engage in acts of corruption. Notwithstanding that, Mr. Speaker, I think it's sometimes as politicians we get labeled immediately upon entering the political arena. And I say that because I heard the member for Soufrière make mention of what she had to go through last week in terms of public media, social media posts casting certain allegations at her and at her office, saying she's using her office and getting revenues from sugar or whatever it is. And Mr. Speaker, I think I myself have been a victim of that. I've seen several social media posts where, he just entered politics and he don't have a car again and he has a van. But people also need to understand, Mr. Speaker, that as a politician you do have a salary. And I wish the special prosecutor was there already. He would have been able to go to the credit union and he would have seen that I make a monthly contribution to pay for the van that he said that I have. So we need to dispel this type of things, that because you're a politician that you're not supposed to have anything, or you're not supposed to be able to engage in any sort of investment. I think what we need to do is we need to be open and transparent about the type of investments that we engage in, Mr. Speaker, so that persons can feel comfortable. I see nothing wrong with me buying a piece of land if I can afford a piece of land, Mr. Speaker. But I should not have to go and hide and buy land under people's name or anything of that sort. And I think that is a culture that has brewed over a period of time, where we've seen persons worried, or we hear people in the public domain tell you that they're very uncomfortable because, and I see, I think section K in corrupt conduct, Mr. Speaker, in the schedule, it says acquiring directly or indirectly property or pecuniary resource disproportionate to his or her legitimate sources of income. And I think, Mr. Speaker, there are things that we can call disproportionate, or there are things that I think the leader of the opposition, the member for Choiseul, should be able to afford as a politician. And I think also, so Mr. Speaker, I think this bill holds members of the public, public officials or people who hold public office accountable. And I know what is very good about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that even if I remember for Choiseul said that, user with biases, there is no bias in the bill. And I say there is no bias in the bill because the bill is not for the members of the opposition. The bill is for public officials. Everybody who assumes public office. The bill, it does not favor you or favor me. And it holds every one of us accountable. And the Prime Minister, I remember one time in Cabinet, he said that when the member for Vieux-Fort South was then Prime Minister, he always reminded them that when you're passing legislation, remember you're passing it today and you're in government. But you also have to remember that tomorrow, these same legislations that you're passing, they're still going to be there if you find yourself out of government. So we should never pass legislation because of our personal emotions, or we should not pass because of vexations, as they put it. And I'm happy that this bill does not discriminate against any particular member in opposition or in government. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to give my full support to this bill. I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for bringing this bill, getting the confidence and courage to bring this bill before the House. For some it may be an unpopular decision, but for the Prime Minister, because he understands the importance of ethics and honesty, he has decided to bring this bill here to hold every one of us, every 17 of us here, Mr. Speaker, responsible and accountable, and put measures in place to ensure that when we decide to not be accountable or transparent, that we can be dealt with accordingly, just like when other members of the public decide to assault somebody or do anything to someone, they are held accountable. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that this is an excellent bill. As I said, it's a step in the right direction. If the bill needs to be worked on, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing wrong, but the general intention of the bill is a very good one. I think AG Chambers have done a wonderful job in drafting this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to give my full support to this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Babino.
Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank the people in Babino for their confidence in me, and I promise them that I will give them representation in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, let me take leave to congratulate our fastest woman in St. Lucia, Ms. Julian Alfred, for her excellent performance at the recent Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, UK. And let me congratulate Team St. Lucia for representing us well. We have to congratulate our women who continue to make us proud, as well as our men who have always carried some of the burdens of national development. Look at so many of them, Mr. Speaker, in this honorable House. Let me express condolences to the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Donald Alsey, and I express condolences with the families and thank him for his contribution to national development. I want to thank our former clerk, Ms. Lindell Gustav, for her excellent job in this House, and I will miss that voice. I have heard that voice for so many years. And I was very pleased when I met her in person, and I said, I've always admired your voice. I'm happy she will still be around to pass on some of her skills to her colleagues. Mr. Speaker, let me express condolences to the family of the lady who was brutally murdered in Choiseul, and hope the perpetrators are brought to swift justice. On a positive note, Mr. Speaker, I need to report to this honorable House that I have spoken to our Calypso Queen, Miss Minel Delis, and she indicated that she is recovering speedily. Mr. Speaker, I am here today to pledge my complete, unconditional support to this Special Prosecutor Bill of 2022. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned the two incidents of tragedy of our women just to remind our people that we need justice in this country. This government has inherited a country that was experiencing moral decay, economic destruction, and the erosion of social values. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to do damage control and put this country back on a steady course for recovery and a path to national advancement. We need, Mr. Speaker, to raise the hopes of our people and stop signs of hopelessness that continues to flood our media houses on a daily basis. When I heard my colleague Minister of Agriculture spoke of bananas back in England, I feel so proud, Mr. Speaker, because I heard so much talk about bananas that would have gone to France, and it did not even reach Martinique.
Who said that?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this special prosecutor bill is not about them, it's about us to deal with prevention, treatment, and cure of malpractices, corruption in the public service. The people of St. Lucia put a government to manage its affairs, to enact laws, develop policies, put regulations and guidelines in place to ensure good governance, safety, security, and productivity of its people. The bill is not for politicians. It is for public officials, meaning persons who work for the people of St. Lucia, who are employed by the government. Whether you're a politician, a public servant, a public official. I googled what is meant by special prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. And the meaning given in Google, August 2022, states that special prosecutors, also known as independent counsels, are typically appointed to investigate and prosecute high-profile cases where the ordinary criminal justice machinery cannot be trusted to produce fair results. State and local governments occasionally use special prosecutors. I heard the member opposite indicated that we have several persons, several agencies that are already addressing some of the issues that are in this bill. Well, let me remind him that this bill is an upgrade. It has captured the weaknesses of the others and put it together so that we can deal with some of the deficiencies that exist in existing legislation. Mr. Speaker, this bill speaks to corrupt conduct, actions by public officers or officials that knowingly achieves for the public officer, public official, or for another person an undue advantage. Mr. Speaker, after I read this bill, I said, according to some of the people, how is Mio? Meaning, why now? For so long I've been following Parliament. For so long I've been out of Parliament. This bill was waiting for when I came to Parliament. So some people will tell you, how is Mio? But Mr. Speaker, I applaud the Prime Minister for keeping to the promise that we made to the people of St. Lucia. And we promise to right the wrong. We promise to improve the situation in St. Lucia, and we are doing exactly that. Mr. Speaker, there is a popular phrase which says, follow the money. Getting rich quick. Some say bubble. Some say cocoa macacree. I recall having a conversation with the Prime Minister. And I said, Prime Minister, at the end of this term of office, the salary that they pay ministers will not amount to $1 million. I just did the mathematics. And by doing so, people are asking how some people became millionaires overnight. Mr. Speaker, This bill addresses public office, public officer, public official. These are government positions and persons employed by the government. There are persons these are the persons who could be prosecuted as defined within the parameter of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I did raise the point that getting rich quick is one that will raise many people's eyebrows. And there are persons we notice in our society who have gotten rich very quickly, and they are spoken about in the constituencies, but certain devices and operations are used as cover-up. And some people camouflage it. And they said they sold books. They published a book and they were able to raise money. I didn't know that was the bestseller. Some said they had transports. We don't know how many route bands. Some said they have agriculture. We don't know when banana shoot up again. Some said their mother, their father are well off, so they themselves got. Some said it's their wife. I've been following the media to justify how some persons that are alleged to be millionaires among us, how did they get rich so quickly? As a former teacher, principal, trade unionist, community activist, promoter of gender equality, involved in non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, I recalled once I used to hear about bubble. And I said, but what bubble could I do in the school? Am I going to steal somebody's child and bring the child home? We had markers, Bristol board, pens. You know, those little things we have to do to try and help school going. There was no room for any bubble. We could not have been millionaires there, Mr. Speaker. And even becoming a politician, it becomes even harder. One, this bill is keeping us in line. I told the Prime Minister, this bill will handcuff all of us and put a yoke around our neck. But it is not about us. It's about St. Lucia. It's about the future of the next generation. And Mr. Speaker, I recall during the campaign, there was a young man in my constituency in his 30s, and he said he is a millionaire. I said, what is the trick? Why don't you share it with the other boys on the block once it is through the legal means? I don't know what strategy he used, but he said he's a millionaire. I heard the member opposite said he has a little kakada in the bank. I wonder why he alone has kakada and the others have toothpaste. You didn't go to the same store so that you leave out the kakada and purchase some toothpaste. Mr. Speaker, this bill is there to protect me and to protect you. And I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, why. The persons in my constituency are putting pressure on me to do certain things. And I said, no, it's not right. I'm not doing this. I'm not engaging in any underhand dealing. So now I have the instrument that will justify my actions and my behavior. And this is what our colleagues on this side preach every day. Let us do everything above board. Let us do what is right. And Mr. Speaker, if I had any aspirations to be millionaire in this government, I am further away from it. Because every day, people walk into my constituency and they ask for assistance. Now every dollar this Prime Minister has, you have to sign for it, and you must go in the Treasury to pick it up. And nobody else signs my name except me. So I cannot let people go and collect money on my behalf on their names.
Oh, you want to put your letter too?
I wish I could get one. And for those, Mr. Speaker, it is alleged who purchase property, transport on other people's names, they have difficulty now to take it back on their name because some of the people refuse to transfer. It's my property, why should I transfer it back to you? So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is one that will help us, it will strengthen our position, it will give us the legitimacy to continue to practice and do what is right in this country so that we can stamp out corruption. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia, a few years ago, ranked very high in the region. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that because I work regionally and I work internationally. And I listened to what people were saying about St. Lucia. And today, maybe starting from last year, July 2026, we are trying to bring it back to where it was. July 26, 2022, we are trying to bring it back to where it was, Mr. Speaker. And one thing I would encourage we have to do here in this house is to document the number of legislations that this government has passed in this house. And every piece of legislation is to enhance and improve the quality of life for people in this country. Mr. Speaker, you recall in March we passed the domestic violence bill. And Mr. Speaker, that has worked wonders for St. Lucia. Continues to work wonders. We just went through the bill dealing with the youth economy. We deal with the bill dealing with amendment to the firearms and a number of other legislation. And if we compile that into a booklet, you would have seen the leap that this country has taken in 1 year. And this will certainly give us the kind of ranking that will put us apart with our other countries in the region, because when we pass this legislation, Mr. Speaker, it's going to send a signal to the regional and international community that St. Lucia is not accepting corruption. And with that, people are going to develop confidence in this country. That is the nature of this bill. Regionally, and I did not know, some people underestimate social media. And the little discussion that we have here, we think because it's in this room, it's about us. It's about the world. And after we passed the domestic violence bill, this bill, Mr. Speaker, it was in high demand before it became an act. People were asking for it regionally. They said they need a copy of the bill. So when we go through this special prosecutor bill, people are going to ask, what is it St. Lucia is doing? And then the eyes of the world will be on us, because they are going to watch us like a hawk to see if we are engaging in any form of corruption. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a message that is sent to public officers. We manage the public service, we work with public officers, and we have to tell them, no, it's not like before. Things have changed. According to the law, this is what we are supposed to do. I cannot help you in this because this is crossing line with the special prosecutor bill. Mr. Speaker, upon the appointment of the special prosecutor, the ministry responsible for the public service shall, on the advice of the Attorney General, in writing, set the terms and conditions of employment of the special prosecutor. For the avoidance of doubt, the special prosecutor is also a public officer. So if the special prosecutor decides to go on a side or go below board, then that special prosecutor is also open to be prosecuted too. So it is not for one and not for all, it's for all of us. So there is no escape. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with modern trends for productivity in the public service, there will be the need to ensure that the terms and conditions of employment include key performance indicators. Too often, Mr. Speaker, we appoint public officers and we do not put proper measures in place to evaluate their performance in the job. Public servants are constantly accused of poor performance. How do we measure performance of our officers? Many times we hear persons request promotion and an increase in salaries without adding value to performance and responsibilities. So the St. Lucian public will be out there to see what is it our public prosecutor will deliver, and the expectations are very high. So the public prosecutor has to deliver because people want to see. Don't tell me all the talk about corruption that the public prosecutor cannot get one case. Mr. Speaker, the special prosecutor has to get to the bottom of many of the statements alleged cases of corruption in the government or by politicians and persons employed by government. The people need answers to their questions under suspicion. Mr. Speaker, this is a promise we made to the people of St. Lucia in the manifesto, and as cited by Minister for Soufre on page 28 under the section Good Governance, Anti-Corruption and Constitutional Matters. Enact anti-corruption legislation, and we have no choice but to fulfill that. And that is what we are here to do today. Mr. Speaker, this bill is designed to ensure that we as politicians and public officers walk a straight, stay on track, and walk on a straight and narrow path. It's almost like a handcuff. Mr. Speaker, those who went before us may not end up being any better. The Creole phrase says, "Chat pala, wat kabaybal." So, ça qu'ils a fait, ça a bien fait. They may have had a ball, but they may be having a diarrhea now. Those who put cocoa out to dry, they need to watch out for the rain. Ça qui mette kako dehors pour sec, yo ka ni pour veiller pour la pluie. Et ça qui a commencé ni la digit, c'est yo poupée. Mr. Speaker, I recall telling the Prime Minister, I hope he has the library, not the book, the library that he has found in government to pass over to this special prosecutor when that person will be appointed. Because I have heard so much, I have seen so much. I want an independent person to examine it and tell us what he or she has found. Mr. Speaker, when a Prime Minister could pay over $7 million for vaccines and we have not received one, Mr. Speaker, where did the money go? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has a long list of money that was wasted. Prime Minister, I hope you have it in a safe. So when the prosecutor comes, he can examine that. We need these monies, Mr. Speaker, to help the people in St. Lucia, to improve the quality of life, send the children to school, take care of their health, improve housing, pay their bills, put food on the table, and earn a livable wage, Mr. Speaker. We need that. And that special prosecutor will help us recover some of the monies you had and say we are about wash, Mr. Speaker. Other bomb, because it cannot be deposited in the bank. A young lady met me and she told me some guy told her he's tired of holding these monies. I don't know. I hope the special prosecutor can reach there. Mr. Speaker, what is of critical importance is protection of persons making complaints. Because we know we have a challenge with protection for witnesses and persons making claims. Mr. Speaker, the people have been asking for a special prosecutor. So today, we are here to deliver the wish. They need to be mindful that the Prime Minister and the ministers cannot arrest or charge anyone, even if you have the evidence. You do not have the power to do that. It must be done according and within the law. Let the person who will be so appointed after this bill has become an act and a law, let that person do what we expect and what is right. Mr. Speaker, I give all my support to this bill. I stand with the Prime Minister 110% so that we get this bill in operation after it has become law. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I thank my colleagues for the very patient and attentive hearing. I rest my case, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Castries South.
Yeah, but nobody else. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues who have expressed condolences to Speaker, I'll say, former Speaker who passed away. I also want to join the representative from Strozel Saltibus when he expressed condolences to the family of his constituent who was horrifically killed, Mr. Speaker. And I think all of us on this side would know the individual very well. She was very active in our party, and all of us would have shared space with her in various gatherings. Mr. Speaker, today is a very special day. And it is special for many reasons. But for me, it is especially significant, Mr. Speaker, because today is a day when we honoring an election promise where we said to the electorate that we are going to put in place the mechanisms to ensure greater transparency and accountability in our political system. And whilst many people have asked us to take action against what they saw as the unmitigated abuse that took place during the last administration, there have always been accusations of corruption throughout our political life, and even during colonial days, Mr. Speaker. But what happened during the last administration, led by a leader who was unrepentant in his conduct and behavior, led many St. Lucians to desire a change of government and that action be taken. Of course, we've had to advise and counsel supporters and the wider public that you cannot just do what they were asking for. There has to be a process and a proper way of doing it. And the calls kept on coming that we had to do something and we had to act. And again, we counseled that it had to be done properly. And I think the member from Castries East went to great lengths to explain that the public has this perception that all politicians are the same, that politicians are corrupt, and they don't say public officials. They don't seem to include the fact that there are public officials apart from politicians that are corrupt in various endeavors, but it is aimed at politicians. And they probably are justified in doing so because they would have seen manifestations of persons who became very rich after entering into politics. And the member from Castries gave an example of persons that entered in particular ways and what they became after a few years in politics. And today really is an attempt for us to start the journey of restoring public trust in public officials. Through this mechanism, where an independent person would be required to receive reports of persons they believe may have been involved in corrupt behavior, for it to be investigated independently, and if found guilty, or if there's reason to believe that there is a case, for charges to be laid and those individuals to be made to pay if they are found guilty. There is now an independent process by which that can be done. And we're saying to the public that we are standing firm on our promise that we are going to do everything possible to restore public trust in the governance of this country. It's not an easy task, Mr. Speaker. It's not an easy task. There are people that would willingly accept payments and inducements and bribes to facilitate other people, Mr. Speaker. And it doesn't, and I said it a short while ago, it's not only politicians. Across the wide spectrum, you hear talk that the police force is corrupt, you hear that customs is corrupt, and those allegations are perpetuated and perpetuated. And now we will have a mechanism where citizens can actually make reports, provide evidence, and it can be investigated. But it's also important, Mr. Speaker, because it creates an avenue where known cases at the official governmental levels, and we'll come to some of these, can be addressed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm also personally happy that this bill is before this House today, because, Mr. Speaker, it's going to depoliticize public accountability. And I want to spend a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, to focus on this issue. The politicization of public accountability. I have a lot to say about it, Mr. Speaker, because not many members, if any, in this honorable chamber went through what I went through in the last 5 to 6 years. Not many members, Mr. Speaker. What I went through, Mr. Speaker, is enough sometimes for a man to really question what this is all about. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, you have to be strong and your faith carry you through. Because, Mr. Speaker, I really, sometimes reflect on this. I spent my life, Mr. Speaker, as a student leader, a youth leader. I went to a couple of good schools, Mr. Speaker, taught at a university, worked my way, Mr. Speaker, to be at the University of the West Indies. I've been a political activist in the Labour Party from very early. A prime minister introduced me to Dr. Anthony. He came back to St. Lucia. I was part of the campaign. We won the elections in '97, Mr. Speaker. I became his attaché. I then went on to London School of Economics, did my PhD, worked in many capitals of the world, Mr. Speaker. Never before anybody questioned my integrity. Never before, Mr. Speaker. And then I entered politics. And somebody, in the most malicious and vindictive manner, because that's their nature, a narcissist, Mr. Speaker, decided that they were going to attack you. Now, during political campaigns, those things happen, Mr. Speaker. It happens. And you allow it, you fight the battle, and you move on. But then it continues, Mr. Speaker, because it's the nature of the being to destroy, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, I had to take action, because if you are accusing somebody of something, you must be able to prove it, Mr. Speaker. And it got nastier and nastier, because somebody cannot accept that they have to lose, Mr. Speaker. And even when they win, they want to be able to make an example, Mr. Speaker. And somebody made the point about the persons can seek to destroy your reputation, accusing you of all kinds of things, Mr. Speaker. And sometimes knowing, Mr. Speaker, that there's no basis for it, Mr. Speaker. So somebody thought I was rude to sue them because I'm a Shasni, and who are you to sue me? And then he asked the High Commissioner in London, see what you can find on Ernest Hilaire. See what you can find. And he went through the documents in the High Commission and using the resources of the state, because I have to destroy Ernest Hilaire, is too rude to stand up to me. Too rude. Who is that little boy who feels he can stand up to me? You know who I am? And Mr. Speaker, they got a document that showed the vehicle I'd purchased had been registered in the High Commission name. The then High Commissioner did not ask the staff what happened. He didn't ask them whether they had paid for it. He wrote saying there's a missing state asset without doing any investigation, without reporting it to any special prosecutor. They then write to the Director of Finance, who writes to the Controller of Customs and says, this has been reported to us. We have no record that we bought this vehicle. We have no record that it belongs to us, but I want it investigated. I want it investigated. And the narcissist continues, Mr. Speaker. But his day will come, because the day they elect him no longer leader of UWP, so, Mr. Speaker, he continues, goes to the Controller of Customs and asks him to investigate it, because the vehicle does not belong to me. Now, ownership of a vehicle is theft. If it's not yours and you claim it's yours, it's theft. The police handles that, not Customs. Customs handles custom duties and whatnot. The Controller does not play ball. He's removed. And they put in a lady who is supposed to be a supporter of the party, and of the promise that she will take action against Ernest Hilaire. And the individual is available now to give evidence. And if a special prosecutor should look into it, we will get all the information. She does not play ball. She is removed. Transferred her to be a PS in sustainable development. And a gentleman who foolishly writes a report saying that the Prime Minister had a meeting and expressed his well, I'll come to that one in a while because I have the document there. So the Prime Minister was displeased that they were not taking action quickly enough against Ernest Hilaire. But what is the action? The action against Ernest Hilaire, according to his claim, and I'm not even sure exactly what it is. First, it was I defraud the British government. Then I did not pay taxes. But I'm an ambassador in England. I don't pay taxes on the purchase of anything. Then it is I did not give customs a document. So I didn't give customs a document, which I didn't have really. I must be made to pay, and you're telling the entire world I'm a thief, I stole a vehicle. The entire world. I've lived my life as a professional, served my country well. I have a reputation, I've worked, and I don't want to boast, but I've worked in some very distinguished places. And I have friends calling me from England, saying to me that they got a call from the Met Police saying government of Central has asked them to investigate me. And they're wondering what's going on. The Met Police to investigate me? For what? Because you say I didn't give customs a document? The Met Police? And different individuals in England start calling me, saying to me, what's going on? Because they are calling all acquaintances to find out what kind of person you are. But when you've lived your life well, people don't forget that. So everyone started sending me copies of the notice they got from the Met Police. And they said to me, there's one thing they can assure me. They have nothing but good things to say about me. Because the politicization of actions, you did it for political reason, to destroy somebody with no regard for family, siblings, or anything. Because you claim I did not give customs a document. Sheer wickedness. This bill stops this. This bill stops this. If there is an accusation against somebody, submit the evidence to a special prosecutor and they will investigate it. That's what this bill does. It stops that. Now, our Prime Minister always tells us we must set a new tone in this country. We must create a St. Lucia that is more tolerant, understanding, loving, and caring. This is what this will do. You will not go through what I went through. But the story continues. It continues. The investigators they sent from St. Lucia to go up to England to get the information. COVID struck. And they got lost in a hotel somewhere because they can't travel. Everywhere shut down. You met them on the flight. At state expense, you know. State expense sent 2 officers to England to find out what they can on Ernest Hilaire because he must destroy Ernest Hilaire because he claimed I didn't give a document. The same person, leader of the opposition, goes on Andre Paul, and when he is asked, isn't there evidence that Ernest paid for the vehicle? He said, yes, it's his vehicle, he bought it. But then in registering on the High Commission, he gave it back as a gift, and he took back the gift. The leader of the opposition, on Andre Paul, he did. Yeah, he. And you know what he said to Andre? It's his vehicle, he bought it, but he gave it back as a gift, and he took back the gift without permission. That's what he says.
Because the truth is what the man believes.
That's what he says. Because he believes he can destroy and he can break. But you cannot break. Because I came back and won by 1,500 votes. You can't break. And watch where you are today. The worst leader in the history of the UWP. And they kicked him out just now too as leader of the UWP. That's the vindictiveness and the nastiness. It gets worse. It gets worse than that. Worse than that. So then now he installs a new acting controller of customs who has promised he will deal with Ernest Hilaire. The good thing I have good friends who put up their hand and say, we're representing you free of charge. Free of charge. And then I learned later on that they wrote to the US Department of Justice to ask Google to give them all emails Ernest Hilaire have in Gmail. And I get all the documents. Somebody left it in a minibus somewhere, so I got a copy of it. You know? And one day, we were in Parliament, and I was presenting, and after I'm finished, and maybe the member from Castries East can remember that, the member from Mico South, the leader of the opposition, sat and he said to me, CIA investigating you, MI6 investigating you. And we thought that we laughed it off. I did not know then that he had actually written to the US government for the agencies to investigate me because I did not give customs a document. So can you imagine you are? No, I ain't going on this. So, you know, they have formal mechanisms through which they can do it. But why would you ask Gmail to give you all my emails so you can read them to see what you can find about Ernest Hilaire to destroy Ernest Hilaire? That is what the member from Mico South did. This bill stops this. Stops it. So then now he has the Met Police trying to find out what they can on me in England. He have trying to get the Justice Department, and the Justice Department gave them a nice long response asking them about 20 questions. Obvious questions that made the government of Central look so stupid. So stupid. Elementary things they asked them to answer. But that's what he's engineering, because I did not give a document to customs according to him for something he admits is mine. This bill stops this. It stops this. What he did will go down in history as one of the most vindictive acts ever committed in our political history. And he will pay one day for it. No, there ain't payment yet. You know, one time I made a joke in our exchanges. And I said to him, when we finish with him, he'll be like a zombie in Castries. You know? So, but you see, because that's the wickedness that a member from Mico South had, this bill will make sure we don't treat people in public office in such a manner anymore. So he has Met Police, and he has the US authorities. And do you know what it is like that you get an invitation to come to attend a conference? You get an invitation to come and participate in an exchange, a think tank, and then you land, and the immigration officer is looking at you, because you know in the system they have flags, because you're under investigation. But why would you just destroy somebody's professional reputation? Why would you do it? Because they didn't give a document? Is that the only way your mind can conceive of destroying somebody politically? Is by doing this? I mean, this is the quality of individual that heads the United Workers' Party right now. That's the nature of the person who was once Prime Minister of St. Lucia. But he cannot break me. He cannot break my colleagues. Because I'm not the only one. I probably got the worst. They have others, and others will speak if they want about their tribulations. So let's move on. And then, when they cannot find anything, they decided charging me because I didn't give a document. And at my home, customs officials reached to seize my vehicle, including friends of mine. They are professionals, they're doing their job, and they know what they're doing is wrong, but the controller has given a directive to seize my vehicle. Seize my vehicle and to press charges against me. As it turns out, Mr. Speaker, as it turns out, we go to mediation. And that's where the real folly is exposed. Now, I was advised by my lawyers then, do not speak in public about what happened in mediation because it is a confidential process. But the controller, you've given me permission, the controller of customs, the former acting controller, Chico, has since gone public and said what took place in mediation. So I think I can take the liberty to say a few things. In trying to resolve the matter in mediation, he is asked, what do you want us to do to resolve this matter? He says, I need a copy of the document. We said, okay. The High Commission had it. The High Commission sent it to St. Lucia. It went to Customs. But we will try to get it from London and present it to you. Will that satisfy you? He says, I need to take it to my superior to see if I can accept it. You're like, huh? Who's your superior? The Minister of Finance and Prime Minister. That's what he says. That he will accept the document if we can provide it. Now, as it turns out, when Customs had called me for an interview, we had no idea what was going on, but they gave us the file to go through. My lawyer took out his mobile phone and he took photos of all the documents. So we knew they had the document. We knew they had it because we took out photos. Now, lawyers are smart like that sometimes. Lawyers are smart like that sometimes. So then now, can you imagine the acting controller is saying, if we give him the document, he'll accept it, but he must go to Alan Chasney to see if he will accept it for him to drop the case. That's the acting controller, Chico, there. The same one who said that the Prime Minister was displeased he would not take an action against me. Of course, elections take place, his government loses, acting controller, his acting period ends, a new controller is put in place. A third one reads the file and he says, this is totally unnecessary. We go to mediation and they ask him, what do you intend to do? And he says, look, I'm dropping this case. This has no basis. This is unnecessary. This is politically motivated. As the new acting controller, I cannot proceed with this matter. The new acting controller. So that's the third one. The first one, Alcindor did not proceed. The second one, Mrs. Montu, did not proceed. Chico decided he would do it. And then when the new one, who is there now, comes in, he says he's finished with it. So the case is dropped. The case is dropped. But then now I sued Chico for his behavior and his conduct, together with the Attorney General. Not this one, but the position of Attorney General. And listen to this. I want you to hear this. So we are asked to go to mediation. So I have to sit across from Chico. The same Chico that sent them to seize my vehicle, that was persecuting me and prosecuted me. And I'm asked, I had to say to Chico, I have no ill feelings towards you, despite what you've done to me. You've hurt me professionally, you've hurt my family, my children, but you're fighting Alan Chasney's battle. I will deal with Alan Chasney, Chico. I just want you to apologize and let this be over. The state will deal with my loss of use and all damages, but you need to apologize to me. I don't want nothing from you but apology for the harm and hurt you caused to me. I said, I have no ill feelings towards you. Alan Chasney's fight you're fighting for. That's what you're doing. Chico, then we agreed on an apology. We agreed. And to show you the nature of those individuals, after the apology is given on his behalf, it's recorded, he goes publicly on team and said he never apologized. And he's all over saying that he never apologized to me for me to drop the charges against him. He learned to lie like the member from Miku South. But we had it recorded. We had it recorded. So they had no turning back that he did apologize. And I kept quiet and I said, the same guy I just gave a lie, I could have really rolled on him and made him pay the heaviest price. Even when I was generous. Because it's not really about him. He's just the servant. That's what he was, a pawn. Because the person, the vindictive, nasty individual behind all of it, is not him. He still wants to deny he apologized. But of course, it being said, the court, dealt with the matter or whatnot. And of course, the member from Microsoft, still not satisfied. He wants a judicial review as to whether the controller could have dropped the case. But that's another story. I'm not getting involved in this one. The record will show that the controller of Customs dropped the charges against me. The record will show that Chico apologized for what he did to me. I have no ill feelings towards Chico or anybody. I will fight my battles. But that's the nature, and that's why I'm happy about this bill. I'm happy about it, Mr. Speaker. So, I've been through a lot, Mr. Speaker. but I still have the spirit, Mr. Speaker, of a warrior. You can't break me, you can't destroy me like this. I know right is on my side. I know truth is on my side. I know how I have lived my life, Mr. Speaker. And nothing can take away that from me. Nothing. This bill prevents other St. Lucians from being treated in such a way, Mr. Speaker. If somebody is suspected of doing something wrong, report it and let it be investigated. Mr. Speaker, I was going to read for you something that Chico said in an affidavit to show you the extent, Mr. Speaker, of what was taking place after the case, and that's what he filed in the courts, you know. That's what Chico filed in the courts. And I want to read it. Because after the case against me was dropped by the controller, he said there was a meeting between the controller, himself, and the DPP. And this is what, and I'm quoting him in an affidavit that he filed in the courts. He says, the DPP said to Mr. Emmanuel, how the F you made a decision like that? You didn't consult with my office, and you didn't even have the decency to have a discussion with Chico, who was involved in the matter. That's, yes, that he's saying the DPP said that to the controller. The DPP? Why? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, yes, on permanent establishment. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the nature of the member from Miku South, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to another dimension to this bill. Another dimension. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, I will never harbor any hatred or any anger. I've had my hurts, but I know I'm a stronger person for it. And I knew one day we would be on this side and he would be on that side, Mr. Speaker. I knew that one day. And I had the faith, Mr. Speaker, that he would be there. And his tribulations have just begun, Mr. Speaker. Just begun, Mr. Speaker. That we cannot stay in St. Lucia for more than a week, Mr. Speaker, and he knows why. But, Mr. Speaker, there's another dimension to this bill. Yeah, exactly, Mr. Speaker. But let us look at another aspect of this bill, Mr. Speaker. Let us look beyond the corruption side of it, the corruption side. Because, and I really want assurances, Mr. Speaker, and when the member from Castries East speak, and even my dear friend from Castries Central who's a lawyer, you know, there are times when actions would be taken, agreements signed, decisions made, and one can argue that there was no corruption. Nobody got any bribe, inducement, or anything. But I think the outrageousness of a decision must lend itself to investigation. You cannot make decisions that are so bad to this country that we lose millions of dollars and you just get away with it scot-free. And I'm not even talking about whether there was corruption or not. It's two things. Either you're grossly irresponsible in your decision making, or you are magnificently stupid in your decision making. You know, it's either of them, Mr. Speaker. Either you are, Mr. Speaker, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to explain to you. Either you're irresponsible in making a decision like this, or you can't get it, you're not there. Mr. Speaker, let me just give you a few examples. Mr. Speaker, we signed an agreement with a consulting firm, to give management consulting at OKEU. To give management consulting advice, $12 million a year. $12 million a year. Think about that, St. Lucians, Mr. Speaker. $12 million a year to give advice on how to manage OKEU. For 2 years, 24 million EC dollars. Well, at least Lockerbie was putting down physical structures and stuff. How can you not ask the person who made that decision, how did you, on what basis, what's the value for money for this country to have to pay a consulting firm or a firm offering consulting services $1 million a month? $1 million a month. Somebody needs to explain that to the people of St. Lucia. $24 million. 12 a year for 2 years. 12 for 2 years. But somebody explain that, Mr. Speaker. I'm told it's 12 a year. 12 a year. Mr. Speaker, whether it's 12 for, even if it's 12 for 2 years, Mr. Speaker, and assuming I'm wrong, it's still too much to pay. Somebody has to explain this, Mr. Speaker. How do you make a decision like this? Even if there is no corruption involved, you still have to explain it. Mr. Speaker, the vaccines. Somebody must be held accountable for that decision. Even if there was no corruption in terms of bribery or kickbacks, Mr. Speaker, how can you take $7 million of this country's money, give it to somebody to bring vaccines for you? That entity has no track record. They have no guarantee they will deliver. They give you no security to hold, Mr. Speaker. How can you do that? There's no proper due diligence. The financial procedures are not followed. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, that consultancy for OKEO did not go out for tender, nor was there a direct award. Just think about it. Did not even bother to give a direct award. Just sign a contract of that huge amount. No public tender and no direct award. And I know that for a fact. The Prime Minister was not there. I was acting Prime Minister, Mr. Finance. And they brought it for me to sign. And I said, I ain't signing this. I call him Prime Minister. I say, boss, what's this? He said, what? No, I didn't sign it. When I told the Prime Minister, he couldn't believe that. But you were Prime Minister, Mr. Finance. You didn't even have the decency, if you're not going out for public tender, to at least give a direct award to legitimize the contract. You just first allowed it to happen. You allowed it to happen. And then they bring it. Mr. Speaker, the vaccines. How can somebody not be asked? How can there not be an investigation, Mr. Speaker, as to what happened with the vaccines? And I'm not even accusing anybody of stealing money or getting kickback. I'm talking about the outrageousness of the decision. Mr. Speaker, let me give you a third one. We've spoken about the Roseau Dam, Mr. Speaker. How, and the Prime Minister has spoken about it earlier, how can we not report to the special prosecutor to find out what happened with the Roseau Dam? And the member from Meko South, the leader of the opposition, has stood up in his house and defended the decision. He stood up and defended it. The same Ezekiel has put up against him now to be leader. You see how the world goes, how it goes wrong? You know, it keeps going around? No, sometimes it takes a linear path. But when you're bad and vindictive and nasty, it goes wrong. And the barking dogs bite you in your, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, how can we not take a look at the Roseau Dam, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, you spoke this morning about the Boundaries Commission. What was telling was what you did not say. What you did not say, Mr. Speaker. So let me say a little bit more than what you said this morning. So, Mr. Speaker, Guy Joseph took action against the Commission for wanting to change the boundaries. And he said the reason why he did not support it is because we were trying to redraw the boundaries to make sure he loses. And he still lost. And he still lost. He never thought Joachim would come and beat him. He says he can never lose. But here what makes this thing really outrageous. So they take action, they go to court, and they said that Astafan and the other lawyers are friends of Kenny Anthony and they will be biased, so they replaced them. The court threw that out and the court awarded costs to the commission. The court awarded costs to the commission. So that means Guy Joseph had to pay the commission. Yeah? It goes on, Mr. Speaker, where the government changes and there's a new commission. And then they decide now they're not going ahead with the case anymore. Guy Joseph is going to drop the charges. And in exchange for dropping the charges, listen to this, in exchange for dropping the charges, Guy Joseph will not pay costs to the commission, and the commission will pay his lawyers for him. Double whammy. Not only, listen to how bizarre. So they will not pay, Guy Joseph will no longer pay to the commission, and now the commission will pay his lawyers for him. Somebody must look into this. But here it is. The bill that the lawyers send, the first invoice, is about $500,000. $500,000, the first invoice. The first one, $500,000. You see, $500,000 for a case in court. Nothing. Sorry, and they lost. That they lost. Yes, he lost. And his lawyer's bill was $500,000. The first invoice. No, the first. I didn't say that's all. I will tell you what all the invoices were. All the invoices came up to about $1 million. $1 million. So here what they're agreeing. They're agreeing that Guy Joseph will not pay the commission that he owes, and the commission will pay his lawyer's fees for him, which is at about $1 million. Mr. Speaker, can I just pass by? Whoever made that decision has to explain it. Now here what happened. When they came to an agreement, a consent order, where all parties agreed that's how we're settling it, the judge heard it, and the judge said, I am not approving this. For a judge to say, even if all of you all agree that's what you're doing, I'm not approving it. Because the judge, for whatever reason, I might speculate, the judge had to see that something was so wrong with this. And they went and they revised it, and the judge still say, even if what y'all revised, I'm still not approving it. But for a judge to take a decision that what the parties agree on among themselves, he's not approving it, tells you something was very wrong, either legally or otherwise. That person must explain, what is this about? This is what this UWP is about. Now you understand why the member from Castres North had to leave. And I keep telling the member from Strozell, the longer you stay, short, Mr. Speaker. The police headquarters, Mr. Speaker, is another one, and I will leave it to other colleagues to deal with because I want to move on. But somebody has to account as to why did the police buildings were demolished for nothing happening after. It's not to say works were going to start in a month's time, or works were going to start in 3 weeks' time, or 2 months. Why did somebody go and break down the buildings? Why did 2 people go and break down the buildings? But I leave that to another colleague to deal with. Can you imagine that? But that's another story, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was a particular gentleman who, was an operations man in 2016, the campaign against me in Castres South. I know him, we grew up in the same area. And then he eventually went up against me in 2016. But when you're looking at a list of payments over the 5 years, Mr. Speaker, in 2021 he went up against me. When you see the list of payments, Mr. Speaker, payments, if I read it out to you, my hour will be taken up, Mr. Speaker. The amount of money that was paid to that individual, Mr. Speaker. By the time you don't really call names because, you never know where it will head. Mr. Speaker, how is it an individual who's been prepped to go up against me can be paid so much money under CDP. And some of those projects, I am told, never even happen. The kind of fees that were paid, Mr. Speaker, if I call them out to you, a lot of them in cash office too. A lot of them in cash office. Mr. Speaker, over $2 million paid out in consulting fees and supervision fees, Mr. Speaker. But we have the figures. We have the figures, Mr. Speaker, and we have the project numbers and project. There's no project for project number, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the DSH, the Royal St. Lucia Turf Club, had a race, and the government of St. Lucia. Now this one is really, really ticklish, Mr. Speaker. The government of St. Lucia signed a 3-year contract with the Royal Turf Club as a sponsor. 2019, 2020, and 2021. For the first horse race, in exchange, I have a copy of the agreement, so if anybody disputes it, I can make it a document at the house. In exchange for the sponsorship, where St. Lucia will get St. Lucia name on all things promotional items for the Royal Turf Club race. Now, this race is not broadcast internationally. It's not like CPL where millions, it's like boxing in paradise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know how much we paid for that race to sponsor it? $800,000 US. Almost $2 million EC dollars as a sponsor of that race in 2019. Just for the government of St. Lucia. Just for St. Lucia to be named as a sponsor of that race. I can make it a document at the house if you say no. You know. Or you must stand on a point of order and request it. So I'm told. So just think about that. $800,000 US, $2 million. $2 million for St. Lucia to be a sponsor of the event. $2 million. 800,000 US is about 2 million. 2.1. For St. Lucia name to be on the name and the promotional. And in exchange, and here's the good part, to get 120 VIP tickets and 500 regular tickets. We pay $2 million. Is 2.1 million EC. 2.1 million EC. And you tell me, even if there was no corruption, even if no one got kickbacks, even if no one got any bribe, how do you make a decision like that using the taxpayers' money? Somebody has to account for that. Mr. Speaker, just another little decision, and I can go on and on, Mr. Speaker. When a Prime Minister travels to London, and he rents a hotel room that costs £2,000 a night. Now, if you doubt it, stand up and rise on a point of order. With government now, we have the documents. 2,000. Now listen to this. I don't have a problem if anybody is staying in a hotel that costs £2,000 if it's your money or if your host is paying. But when you're taking the taxpayers' money, to pay the hotel room. I mean, I was a student in London. I live in cheap accommodation. So, I wouldn't exactly encourage you to stay in cheap accommodation as a Prime Minister. I'd be very disappointed if my Prime Minister stay in a £50 a night Airbnb, and say representing my country. He might do it. But, Mr. Speaker, £2,000 a night? £2,000 a night? And you're proud of this? £2,000 a night with taxpayers' money. I can go on and give you more details because he was not alone, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want us to understand, and the general point I'm trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that
the member for Castries South, you have 15 minutes left.
Okay, I'll round up, Mr. Speaker. No, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, my point, that's why London was coming against you. my point, Mr. Speaker, is that in this bill, we focus a lot on corrupt conduct, where we believe an unfair advantage was gotten, somebody was helped and he got an unfair advantage. I'm looking at it beyond this, Mr. Speaker. Beyond this. I am thinking, Mr. Speaker, that this bill should allow us to cause people who took decisions that affected this country to explain to us or explain why they took those decisions. Mr. Speaker, we all know about the DSH agreement, and I'm not going to speak bad about DSH or anything of that nature, Mr. Speaker. But how is it that under Dr. Anthony, the member from Beaufort South, for more than almost 2 years, we are negotiating, trying to come up with an agreement that's in the best interest of St. Lucia? Just think about it. There's back and forth in emails, exchange of documents, and then you become a prime minister. And within 2 weeks of becoming a prime minister, you will sign an agreement. And the member from Stroza is not there, but he also signed. Can you explain to St. Lucians what it is that motivated you to sign such a terrible agreement? Explain that to me. How can this bill be used for you to stand up before the people of St. Lucia and provide justification for your actions? How? Because that agreement, no sane person should ever sign it. How did you sign it? Are you sane? And then you ask that I be charged because I didn't give a document. I did not give a document.
Yes, I'm not sure what you mean by the luxury. If the member is saying anything you take objection to, you can rise on a point of order under Standing Order 44. If you don't rise, you are accepting what he's saying. So I don't know about latitude.
No, but if the member from Miko South wants me to give more glaring and graphic details about his conduct, I can do so. I'm trying to keep it decent in the House. But I can say a lot of things about your conduct as a Prime Minister. But I will not go down that road because we're different. We're different. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe if you sign such an agreement, you have to be able to explain the thinking and the justification for it. You have to be able to. How can the NIC wanting to buy the Cabot lands, they assess it, they took a decision to buy it, to be the heritage of St. Lucians, to be part of their portfolio of assets. And then they have been instructed not to buy it, but give the loan to somebody else to buy it instead. And I'm not even saying there was any corrupt action. Just explain to the people of St. Lucia how you came to make such a decision. It's not a natural decision. Just think it through, that the NIC is about to buy those lands for the people of St. Lucia. They are told, don't buy it. Give somebody else the money to buy it for themselves instead. Does that make sense? Is that logical? Is that sensible? But how can the people of St. Lucia not ask? And this is not a document that Ernest Hilaire did not give customs. So I've asked the Met Police, the Justice Department to get involved because I didn't give a document. That's not what this is. This is tens of millions of dollars that has been lost. And and the Prime Minister always says to us, if the developer comes to invest and he get a bois, he get a bois. You can't blame him for that. You can't blame the developer because he sits across the table and the Prime Minister says, I give you whatever you want. You can't blame the developer for taking it. That's, and there's a lot of truth in that. So I have no beef per se with them. I have the beef with the person who made the decision. And that's where I have a difficulty. That's where I have a difficulty. And when you ask people, do you want to live in a ghetto in Beaufort all your life? Or do you want to be in the pool of the Caribbean? And then you're going to build how many islands? Explain that to St. Lucians. For me, this bill This bill has to be able to cause people to come in and explain to the country why certain decisions were made. And I'm only touching some of the cases. I know other colleagues will raise other matters. That's just some of them. And I really want, Mr. Speaker, for you to put that against what I went through. The tarnishing of my reputation, what I had to sustain over many years. But then you can proceed to take this country for granted, give away tens of millions of dollars as if nothing mattered, and believe you can just go away scot-free. It cannot be right, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad we're doing this bill, because I don't want the member to go through what I went through. But we're not like that on this side. We're not. Despite all the urgings from across St. Lucia to do something decisive, we've chosen to do it the right way. And the bill provides for the appointment of the special prosecutor not to be determined by cabinet, not by the Prime Minister, not by the AG, but by an appropriate authority, independent authority, that will choose the special prosecutor. So when one is chosen, and you are referred to it, if you are referred, and I hope you are referred, you cannot say it is a political appointment that's there. It will not be a political appointment. It will not be. So I certainly look forward in this regard to have an independent entity, Mr. Speaker, with the investigators and the staffing that can go and search for documents. Because what I went through again, to find out of the blues that the Met Police is investigating me, shattering, my innocence in many ways. I never thought an individual could get so low. But that's your nature, Mr. Speaker. That's his nature, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy, will take away this politicization, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I end, Mr. Speaker, I want to express my support for this bill. I've been waiting for it for a long time because I know what I went through. I know St. Lucians want accountability, but I didn't want others to go through what I went through, where one person can be so vindictive, so narcissistic, is that the right word? Yeah, Mr. Speaker, that they would want to destroy somebody just to make a point. It's wrong, Mr. Speaker. It's morally wrong. But some people have no moral compass, Mr. Speaker. It is ethically wrong, Mr. Speaker. And we've sought to do it the right way. And this is the right way. I'm not a lawyer. I cannot comment on all the legalities of the bill. But the spirit of the bill touches me. It touches me. So whenever reports are made and investigations start, I will feel comforted that they will not go through what I went through. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I move a motion that the House be suspended for 45 minutes, Mr. Speaker?
Honourable members, the question is that this House to stand suspended for 45 minutes. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. Ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended.
Nous, à présent, là, ça c'est chef d'affaires gouvernement, ça c'est honorable Honesty Lay, on est fini de parler, faire une présentation, dire en chaque temps, parler en chaque à cette situation lui-même et rencontrer durant un temps, il était en opposition avec manière bill ça là, ça c'est loi ça là que le gouvernement a passé, qui a affecté bagaille qui a fait en tant que venu avec ces propositions ça là, il dit un chaque side c'était par expérience lui-même avec ça qui fait là c'est commandé pour en 45 minutes pause afin il y a un petit temps pour peut-être pour lever pied yo ay marcher faire un petit bail vie encore so nous enfin il y a deux bouts pour 5 minutes pause avec nous vivre dans Winston.
Yes, in the afternoon session, the member for Soufrière Foncé, Jacques, chided the UNIPAC organization or group, a group that is associated with the past administration, for attempting to tarnish her reputation, and reminded members of the sterling service that she has given to St. Lucia, the region, and the wider world. The member for Dennery South spoke to the fact that from the very beginning of this administration, this bill, this special prosecutor's bill, was spoken of by the acting Governor General in his throne speech. We also heard from he also spoke, that's the member for Dennery South, indicating that the Pierre administration has always spoken of zero tolerance towards corruption. Also speaking to the bill, the member for Miku North was of the impression, says that there is that perception that all politicians are corrupt, and the special prosecutor's bill will correct this perception. We also heard from the member from Babono, and we ended up before the break by listening to the member for Cancery South and the leader of government business, who spoke to the politicization of public accountability and went on in a blistering attack on the leader of the opposition and former prime minister on what he termed, what I would say was a litany of irresponsible spending by the last administration. We are taking a break for 45 minutes and we'll be back here at the St. Lucia House of Assembly. That's what you have anything to add?
Quand nous avons fini à présent, quand Winston dit nous avons déverrouillé en tourment, ça c'est en 45 minutes. Ça a fait peut-être 5h30. Oui, 5h30 nous avons 4h30 nous avons gagné pour 4h30 nous avons ici pour vivre et tout. Nous avons demandé pour rester puis nous tiennent quand nous en cas conseil de gouvernement car d'où exactement ça a passé. Nous avons déverrouillé dans tourment.
But that means that we are taking on new responsibilities. And you must take on these new responsibilities because you are the men and women of tomorrow. Those who will be probably standing in the position in which